That night, the wind blew strongly along the south coast. The waves rolled wildly, as if they held something invisible. It is known that there is an ancient ritual that is said to be able to summon Queen ni Roro Kidul, a ritual that has been banned for a long time because of the risk of inviting disaster. However, the ban did not stop a young man named Rama. Rama is a student who is skeptical of mystical stories. He is known as a rational person who does not easily believe in myths. One day he got information about the forbidden ritual from his friend Andy. Andy is someone who is interested in the supernatural. He often explores places that are believed to be haunted. Andy challenges Rama to prove the truth of the myth himself. At first, Rama refused. However, after being provoked with the words "afraid," his ego was provoked. He agreed to perform the ritual. They planned a trip to the south coast on the night of Friday Kliwan. It is said that the night is the most sacred time to communicate with the supernatural world. Unbeknownst to them, an old man named Pak Sastro warned of the dangers of this ritual. "Don't mess with their world," said Mr. Sastro. However, Rama dismissed it as mere superstition. And so, the long-awaited night arrived. Rama and Andy arrived at the south coast at around 11 p.m. The beach seemed quieter than usual. The sky was overcast, with only a little moonlight illuminating it. The wind was blowing hard, creating an increasingly tense atmosphere. Andy carries ritual paraphernalia, including offerings and a green cloth. Green cloth is believed to be the Queen of the South Coast's favorite color. They began to perform the steps according to the instructions Andy found in an old book. In the first step, they had to stand on the beach and recite a certain mantra. In the second step, they had to put offerings of 7 kinds of flowers on the sand. In the third step, they must stare at the sea without blinking. "If he accepts our call, the waves will turn more violent," Andy said. Rama still felt this was just a game. However, something strange began to happen. The waves, which were calm at first, suddenly rolled in violently. The wind blew harder, almost making them lose their balance. "This must be a coincidence," said Rama in a slightly trembling tone. However, Andy seemed even more convinced that the ritual had worked. They began to hear a soft voice, like a woman's whisper. "What is it?" asked Rama with a tense face. "I don't know, but it feels real," Andy said. Suddenly, the sound of the waves seemed to turn into the sound of crying. They looked at each other. Confusion and fear began to envelop. Rama felt that something was watching them from the ocean. "That's enough, let's go," said Rama. However, Andy refused. "We almost made it," he said excitedly. And just then they saw something. In the distance, they could faintly make out the figure of a woman dressed in green. She stood on the waves without sinking. Her hair was long and flowing, and her face was not clearly visible. "Oh my God! It's him!" Andy shouted. Rama was speechless. His body trembled. A strange feeling came over him. The figure was getting closer. His steps were slow but sure. The rolling waves seemed to stop around him. "We have to run now," whispered Rama fearfully. However, their feet felt heavy, as if something was holding them in place. Andy tried to move, but in vain. The figure's eyes were now clearly visible, black eyes that are so deep. Suddenly, there was a booming sound from the sea. "Who is calling me?" The voice echoed across the beach. Rama felt his chest tighten. The air around them was getting colder. The sand under their feet began to tremble. Andy wanted to speak, but his mouth wouldn't open. The figure was now only a few meters away from them. Her hair fluttered in the sea breeze. "This is not a good idea," whispered Rama. Andy didn't respond. Her eyes were glued to the figure. Then something absurd happened. The seawater around them rose by itself. It's as if an invisible force is controlling the waves. "We have to go!" Rama shouted in panic. With all his might, he pulled Andy's hand. However, Andy continued to stand stiffly. "He's calling us," Andy whispered. Rama looked around. The previously quiet beach now feels more sinister. The sound of the wind turned into a whisper, and suddenly they felt like they were being pulled into the sand. "No, this can't be," cried Rama. The figure was now smiling, a goosebump-inducing smile. "You invited me," he said in a soft but threatening voice. Rama and Andy could not move. As time passed, their bodies sank deeper and deeper into the sand. "Help!" Rama shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the waves. Andy could only stare blankly at the figure. At that moment, everything went dark. The wind stopped blowing. The waves were calm again. The beach was quiet again. Rama and Andy disappeared. Darkness enveloped everything. Rama opened his eyes slowly. He was no longer on the beach. Instead, he was in a strange place. The smell of salt was still in the air, but the atmosphere was much different. He heard the strange sound of water splashing. His head felt heavy. His mind was still fuzzy. Next to him, Andy lay unconscious. "Andy, wake up!" exclaimed Rama while shaking his friend's body. Slowly, Andy opened his eyes. "Where are we?" Andy asked in a hoarse voice. They both looked around. The room looked like an underwater cave. The walls glittered golden green, like the scales of a giant fish. Water flowed in the crevices of the rock, creating an echoing sound. "This can't be," muttered Rama. Soft steps could be heard in the distance. Rama and Andy held their breath. From behind the darkness, the woman appeared again. This time, her face was clearly visible. Her skin was as smooth as pearls, her eyes as black as night. She wore shimmering green cloth, looking elegant and menacing. "You have invited me," she said in a calm voice. "Now you must accept the consequences." Andy swallowed, fear evident in her eyes. We just want to prove the myth," Rama said shakily. The figure came closer, touching Rama's chin gently. "Myth?" He chuckled softly. "I am reality." Rama and Andy looked at each other. They didn't know what to say. "I've been waiting for a man brave enough to challenge me. And you have answered the call." Suddenly, the walls of the cave began to tremble. From the darkness, other figures emerged. They were human shadows, but their faces were blank. Their eyes were pitch black, as if they had no souls. "What is this?" Andy shouted in panic. "Those who came before you," the woman replied, "and now you will be one of them." Rama tried to back away, but something held his feet back. He looked down. The water began to rise slowly, enveloping his feet. "No, let us go," he shouted. The woman smiled faintly. "There is one way to be free." Rama and Andy looked at her expectantly. "Prove that you deserve to live." "How?" Andy asked quickly. The woman raised her hand. Two golden daggers emerged from the stagnant water. "One of you must sacrifice the other. The survivor I will let go." Rama and Andy froze. They couldn't believe what they had just heard. "No, we can't do it," Andy whispered. "Then you two will stay here forever." The woman began to float, the shadowy figures getting closer. Their time was almost up. The water had reached their waists. "We have to find another way," whispered Rama. "But how?" Andy began to panic. Rama saw the dagger floating in front of them. He knew this was a test. He remembered Mr. Sastro's warning before they left. Never challenge their world. And now they were really trapped. "I can't," Andy started to cry. "We have to stay together," Rama said. "If we fight, then we're just like them." The woman's figure narrowed her eyes. "You refuse my offer?" Rama straightened her body. "We will not play by your rules." The woman was silent for a moment, then she chuckled. "Interesting." The water around them suddenly stopped rising. The shadowy figures retreated slowly. "I like humans who have courage. But that is not enough to be free." Instantly, the cave shook violently. A bright green light enveloped them. "What's going on?" Andy exclaimed. The woman began to disappear in the mist. "We're not done yet," she said in a booming voice. "I'll be waiting for you in the next stage." The light grew brighter. Rama felt her body being pulled upwards. Everything became white. Then silence. Slowly, Rama opened his eyes. He was lying on the sand of the beach. The waves touched his feet gently. He got up immediately. "Andy!" he shouted. There was no answer. He looked around. The beach looked deserted. There was no trace of Andy anywhere. "No way!" Her chest was pounding. "Andy!" she called out again. But all she could hear was the sound of the waves. Suddenly, something touched his leg. He looked down. A green cloth was lying on the sand, the same cloth they had brought for the ritual. And on the cloth, there was a faint inscription. "I am still here." Rama's eyes widened. The wind was blowing hard. A faint whisper sounded in his ears. "Don't go back." The beach was getting quieter. However, in the distance, The waves form the silhouette of a person who appears to be wearing a green cloth. Rama looked at him in horror. He just realized something. Andy never came out of there, and maybe he'll never get out. That night, Rama sat on the sand of the beach. Her eyes kept staring at the green cloth lying in front of her. Andy was no longer there. The sound of the waves continued to crash in the distance, but her heart felt empty. She couldn't accept this fact. "No way! Andy is still alive," she muttered. The cold wind hit his face. She clutched the green cloth tightly. Her mind was in turmoil, filled with guilt and fear. But she knew one thing: it wasn't over yet. In the silence, the whispering voice returned. "Return to the sea, or be forever bound to the shadows." Rama gasped. He looked at the water. The waves rolled slowly, forming something. The silhouette of a man standing in the middle of the ocean. "Andy!" Rama stood up quickly. The figure did not move, but the look in his eyes. It was really Andy. "Andy, I'll help you!" Rama ran towards the water, but the closer he got, the further away the figure got. "No, don't go!" Suddenly, a soft laughter sounded. Rama stopped. He looked to the side. The woman in the green dress stood at the water's edge. "What do you want from me?" Rama shouted. The woman smiled faintly. "You want to save your best friend?" Rama nodded without hesitation. "Then give me something in exchange." "What should I do?" The woman raised her hand. From the seawater, a glittering knife emerged. "One life for another." Rama fell silent. He stared at the knife in horror. "You have to choose. You or your best friend." Rama's hair fluttered in the wind. His chest was pounding. He thought of everything. How they got here. What they had done. Andy was his best friend since childhood. She couldn't leave him. But was he really ready to sacrifice himself? "How can I trust you?" asked Rama. The woman smiled slyly. "You have no other choice." The knife floated in the air. Rama grabbed it hesitantly. It was cold, piercing to the bone. He looked at Andy in the distance. "I'll help you," she whispered. Then she raised the knife to her chest. But before she thrust the blade, "No!" A booming voice split the night. The waves suddenly rolled in violently. Rama staggered backward. Andy's figure in the distance begins to change. Green light enveloped her body. "Andy!" Rama tried to get closer, but a great force pulled her back. The woman laughed loudly. "You think I'm really going to let her go?" Rama was stunned. He just realized something. This is not a game of justice. This woman never intended to keep her promise. "You are a liar!" cried Rama. The woman just smiled sarcastically. "All this is just a test of your loyalty." The waves were getting bigger. The sky turned pitch black. Rama gritted his teeth. He would not let this woman win. With the last of his strength, he threw the knife into the sea. Green light instantly exploded in the air. The woman screamed. The waves rose violently, drowning her in the sea. Rama closed his eyes. He felt his body lifted into the air. Everything felt light. The sound of the waves faded slowly. When she opened her eyes, he was back on the beach. Her body was soaked. He looked around. There was no one. Only the crashing waves greeted him. Her heart sank. "Andy?" There was no answer. She stood up weakly. Maybe everything was just an illusion. Maybe Andy was really gone. But when he turned around, "Rama?" she gasped. Behind him, a young man stood trembling. His eyes were wide, but it was really him. "Andy!" Rama immediately ran to hug her. They fell on the sand, both crying. "I thought you were gone," Rama sobbed. "Me too. I thought I was trapped forever." The night breeze blew softly. The green cloth is still lying in the sand. Rama looked at it. He picked it up slowly and threw it into the sea. "We will never come back here again." Andy nodded. They stood, staring at the sea that now seemed calm. The myth, not just a story, they have seen it for themselves, and they survived the curse. For the first time, they felt truly alive. "Let's go home," said Rama. Andy smiled. "Yes, go home." They walked away from the beach. But before actually leaving, Rama turned around once more. Far away at the end of the sea, in the middle of the waves, a shadowy figure stood on the water. The woman in the green dress looked at them with a faint smile. She was not angry. She did not disappear. As if waiting, as if it will come back when someone is brave enough to challenge it again. Rama held her hand tightly. It's over. They continued walking without looking back. The waves crashed gently again. The night was silent again, but somewhere, a faint whisper was still heard. I'll wait for you. Then everything became silent.